Warning: this podcast may contain graphic and triggering content. Please listen at your own risk. Each individual struggle is different, and everyone's recovery and healing journey is different. Please reach out to a certified medical professional if you need help. Welcome to episode 24 of Stomp the Stigma, the podcast aimed to fight the stigma surrounding mental health through education, awareness, experiences, stories, resources, and the vulnerable truth. Joining me to Stomp the Stigma today is Brittney Giacchetta. She's a registered provisional psychologist right here in Calgary at the Serenitynowwellness Center, and she's here to talk all about her own experiences with anxiety, depression, panic disorder, and OCD tendencies, as well as her work and her personal page called Silver Lining Therapy. I hope you guys love this conversation as much as I did. Enjoy. Well, first, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast and reaching out to me. I'm so excited to talk to you today. I feel like we have so much to talk about, so I'm going to try and keep it brief and not too long, but I'm super excited to talk to you, so thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm glad you put that poll and also reached out, because I actually follow you quite religiously on Instagram. So
thank you.
And it's nice to have other Calgarians.
Yes,
people
absolutely.
in the area.
Yeah, I've been wanting to have you on for a while, and you were on my list, and I'm so glad that you reached out. So.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
Okay, well, I want to talk about your job as a registered provisional psychologist. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then also your own experiences with mental health, and also your Instagram page and everything like that. So I guess to start, I want to touch on your personal struggles. And I've heard you talk about your battles with anxiety and depression and panic disorder and maybe some OCD tendencies as well. Do you remember kind of the beginning when you first realized that you were struggling in a way that was, I guess, maybe different from everyone else? And can you kind of take me through that journey?
Yeah, I think in the moment when I really recognized it, so actually before I went into the field of mental health, I did some nursing first. And so I was in nursing school at U of S, and I think that's when I really realized, okay, what I'm feeling is not just school stress, it's not just homesickness. I was having panic attacks, honestly, probably daily. I just straight up wasn't going to class. I was every physical symptom possible, heart pounding, couldn't breathe, hands shaking, all of it, crying for what I thought was no reason. But yeah, so it really hit me in nursing school, and I think at the time I was very it's just the program, you just don't like nursing, whatever, it'll get better. And then it did get worse, and I ended up just fully leaving nursing. I came home to visit my family one weekend, and I just never went back pretty much.
Oh, wow.
And I drove back a month later to get all my stuff and actually pack up. But that was kind of I kind of say my breaking point. I don't know if that's the best word, but that was my version of my lowest. And so even when I came home, I just, I thought everything would instantly get better because I was so convinced it was nursing, and it still wasn't getting better. And so I just finally had to kind of do something to start feeling better. And so that was medication and therapy and just, I don't know, just a lot of self-reflection, really.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I definitely relate to the crying for no reason. That happened to me a lot when I was younger.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because if you know why you're crying, you'll try to do something to fix it.
Well, exactly. When I was a kid, it was okay, what is happening to me? I'm feeling down and sad for no reason. I want to bawl my eyes out, but when you're that young, you have no clue what's happening.
Totally. Well, and actually my first panic attack, I thought it was an asthma attack. So I'd never had a stereotypical panic attack before where you're hyperventilating and all this stuff. And then so that happened in my first one, and I thought for sure it's asthma. So I actually went to the doctor thinking, oh my gosh, I have asthma, I need an inhaler. And they're no, your lungs are great, there's no indications of asthma, blah, blah, blah. And then, it was even then the doctor was is it possible that there's some anxiety going on? And I was kind of no, not possible.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of assume that you're doing better today than you were. What has kind of helped you along that way to get to where you are?
Yeah, it's really been a combination of things. I think for me, what was most important was therapy. Just like as I started talking, I realized there's a lot of things in my life that maybe I never either dealt with or dealt with in like the appropriate way. And so I think a lot of what my anxiety was really just building up, and like nursing happened to be that final stressor that just kind of like allowed everything else to blow up.
Mm-hmm.
I know this isn't everyone's cup of tea. Medication's been really helpful for me, especially with managing the physical symptoms.
Yeah.
So if I can at least kind of calm down the body, because it starts getting like anxiety about anxiety. So then my heart starts racing, then I freak out about my racing heart or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So medication was really good for that. Kind of just some lifestyle changes. I really started to prioritize like self-care. I kind of was one of those people who was like, yeah, self-care, whatever. Like we always hear about it.
Yeah.
But I guess I started to recognize why you need it. So really just working out. I have like a morning routine that I like to follow just to kind of start my day on a certain note. A bedtime routine, and then just kind of being honest with people how I was feeling. It wasn't always easy, but just so my friends kind of knew like what was happening, or my family knew what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this huge like relief when you're just open with everyone and you don't have to really like hide that side of yourself anymore.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's like an instant weight off your shoulders, and then it's normally like, we never knew. Like, why didn't you tell us? And
Yeah.
you're like, oh my gosh.
Well, there is such a stigma around it. I mean, that's kind of why I started this podcast in the first place. And there's such a huge stigma around taking medication. But for some people, like, that is huge for helping them out. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's such a huge stigma around it.
I know, and it's, with that stigma, it's kind of that same idea. Like, if someone was diabetic, they wouldn't think twice about insulin.
Exactly.
Right? It's
exactly.
absolutely like, yep, insulin, give it to me, I'm good. But as soon as it's like psychiatric medication, it's, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I don't know why there's a difference there, but for some reason there is, yeah. Was there kind of a low point for you when you kind of realized, okay, I need help, or like a turning point where you decided that you were going to kind of turn your life around and not really let these mental health issues define you?
Yeah, so this is like kind of a weird memory, but it's always sort of stuck with me. So when I came back from Saskatchewan, I was staying at my parents' just because I needed a bit more support, and like I had a partner at the time, and I don't know, I was like, it's not fair to them. And so I remember one time I was like just in my parents' bathroom, I was gonna have a shower, and I was just like kind of looking at myself in the mirror, and I was like, man, like you just look sick, Brittney. Like physically, I was like skinny and frail, and just, I don't know, like I just looked sick. And I think like actually seeing that, I was kind of like, no, something has to happen. And it was kind of that same day I ended up phoning my doctor and was just like, hey, like I need in your soonest availability, pretty much. I will make any day and time work. But it was just like seeing how much it really affected, obviously myself physically or mentally, but also physically.
Mm-hmm.
And I did lose a lot of weight, and I was like, picking at my skin, and like I didn't look healthy.
Oh, wow.
And I probably wasn't healthy, honestly.
Yeah. So it was kind of like an all of a sudden moment for you.
Yeah, like I think I kept knowing, like I was like, okay, I need help. And I was like sort of trying to, but maybe not as much as I should have been.
Yeah.
But that image, I don't know, something just hit me in that moment. I was like, no, we can't do this anymore.
Mm-hmm. I've talked to a lot of people that have had trouble kind of finding help, or even like the feedback from their doctors. What was your journey like? Was that fairly easy for you?
Yeah, my family doctor was really understanding, actually, which was awesome. So they kind of just like started me on meds right away, and they're like just super transparent, like, look, it's gonna be trial and error. Let's start you on this and just see what happens. And he was booking me in like every 2 weeks, so I could always follow up. So that was really good.
Nice.
I had trouble finding a therapist that I clicked with, which I think is what a lot of people have experienced too, where you do want to be able to connect with them so you can be open, and I found that was more my struggle. Yeah, I had a few therapists who just some of the comments they made I thought were invalidating. I think even in my own field of work that has stuck with me too, as to like make sure I'm wording things properly with my clients, because good intentions can still come off not as great.
Yeah, I get that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, one question I have for you.
Yeah, kind of like the just meditate comments or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it was just that easy. Like, none of this would be happening.
Right, if it was that easy, like, people would be able to heal so much easier.
Totally. Like, this profession wouldn't exist.
Yeah, that is true. I guess on that note, do you know kind of what your triggers are? And what do you do in that moment when that happens to you?
Yeah, so I definitely started to identify them. So a huge trigger is like sirens, like ambulance, police, that kind of thing. And this is because my mom had a stroke. It was like 5 years ago now. And so obviously there is an ambulance and all that stuff. And so that's like sirens have become a huge trigger of, okay, something bad's happened. And then I kind of go into, oh my gosh, I hope whoever's in there is like okay and like not alone and not suffering and whatever. So that's a big one. Another trigger is kind of, again, like I said earlier, those physical symptoms. If my heart starts to race or something, I am kind of like, oh no, why is it racing?
Mm-hmm.
I have some triggers around kind of like, I guess it's really specific situations, but again, it'll be something like related to maybe nursing. They'll be like, oh, this procedure or whatever, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, no. So that's a huge trigger, and I hate blood. So even like nosebleeds or something will just stress me right out.
Oh, wow.
I guess for kind of managing them in the moment, my main kind of go-to is really deep breathing, just because you can do it anywhere. So I really try to breathe myself through it. Sometimes I'll talk to myself, like I'll go to a bathroom and just look at myself in the mirror and be like, Kate, you're okay, everything's fine. You know, you can breathe, splash some water on your face, that kind of thing. But those have been kind of my main ones, is just talking to myself and the deep breaths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Do you have any kind of go-to grounding skills that you use?
Well, it's hard for me because I don't entirely know what my triggers are. Like, I know that I need a certain amount of sleep, I need to be hydrated, I need, like, good, nourishing food. Otherwise, it makes it a lot worse for me, but I don't entirely know what triggers it. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah.
So I guess just for me, a lot of it is routine, keeping up with routine, making sure I'm following all of those healthy habits that I know will make me feel better.
Right.
But for me, something that's very calming and therapeutic is cooking and baking.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so I do that a lot when I'm feeling like in a funk or something. I'll just get in the kitchen and experiment.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's a good point about the triggers, though. I think they can be so internal. Like, it could just be a body state that we're not aware of. And, yeah, like hunger, thirst.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an infection. Like, yeah, just something happening in the body even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Totally.
So I'm still on that journey to kind of figure those out, but
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
No, it'll be worth it. It's a good journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've come so far already, so.
Amazing. That's awesome.
Thank you. Okay, I want to dig into kind of your work life and a little bit of the therapy side of things. So, you're a registered provisional psychologist at Serenitynowwellness Center in Calgary.
Yes.
That's actually so close to where I work too.
Oh, cool.
I'm curious, like, how you got into that field in the first place. Like, did you always want to do that, or did your own mental health issues play a role in that? Like, how did you get into that field?
Yeah, so I always wanted to help people. I guess I didn't know in what way, which is why I originally was like, oh, nursing totally makes sense. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, they definitely help people. But yeah, I think it was after my own kind of mental health struggles that I just kind of realized, like, I really just say, like, they completely probably saved my life, honestly.
Yeah.
And then also it's just, like, really eye-opening, because I think I was one of those people, like in high school, if someone talks to the school counselor, it's kind of like, oh, they're talking to the counselor.
Yeah.
So I was like kind of one of those people, and then I recognized like, wow, they're actually like really helpful people. This is amazing. So yeah, definitely my own experience really influenced it when I was looking at going back to school. I mean, it was a big decision because I was scared I would consistently be triggered and like burnt out, I guess, just because it definitely is a heavy field. But I think because I've kind of, like you were saying, like I've come so far, I've learned a lot of skills, I have a really good support network. I've kind of got my self-care routine around work that it's actually really been a positive experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a really good point about the school counselors. I never really thought about that, but
I don't know if that was a thing at your school. Like maybe it was just my high school.
yeah, we definitely had one. But there was such a huge stigma around going to talk to that person. Like if people found out, like then there's something wrong with you or something major is going on.
Or they were just kind of like the substitute teacher, honestly.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, okay, our teacher's not here today. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, there's already so much extra stress to fit in high school. So when you add the stigma of going to see somebody like that, it just makes it so much worse.
Totally, yeah.
Okay, your work often dives into kind of the dark parts of people's lives. Does that trigger you at all? Or like, how do you kind of leave that at work when you go home? Like, how do you separate that from your own life?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So if it's something I haven't gone through personally, I actually don't find I'm triggered. I mean, I'll still be like, oh, that's horrible, that's sad, all these things. But I think I just like can't maybe relate in the same way that it's actually easier for me to like distance myself to those stories. But as soon as there's someone with like, you know, lots of anxiety or depression or things like that, I'm instantly like, oh my gosh, I see like myself in you. I think for leaving it at work, again, this is definitely something I've really like had to start learning with that whole self-care or whatever, but journaling's been a big thing for me. So just being able to like write out whatever came on my mind that day, whether it's work or life or anything else, and then having my own therapist. So we don't always talk about work, but sometimes it is like, oh my gosh, this week was insane and I just need to like spill it all out to somewhere else that's confidential. And then I do have like a supervisor / mentor who's been really great for me, and we probably check in with each other every week, I'd say.
That's awesome.
So that's been a really good kind of support for me as well.
Oh, that's awesome that you have so much support around you and so many people that you can turn to.
Yeah, I think for me anyways, it's like those support networks have been huge because I always know there's like someone or something, like even if it's a doctor, a pharmacist, whoever. Like I'm kind of like you, I'm definitely like really into routine, and I'll always go to even like the same pharmacist or something. So they just like totally know me by now, but it's great.
I've heard from a lot of people that journaling helps. I mean, I journal too, and I don't know what it is about journaling, but it's just like for me anyways, like expressing everything without having to have somebody else hear it, and I guess not be judged for it or anything like that. Just have it out there and not like bottled up inside.
Yeah, totally. And I find as I'm journaling, like I'll think I'm gonna write about one thing, and then I end up in just like a completely different spot. Like it's just like interesting how the thoughts start to come out and sort of transform, and you're like, okay, I guess this was maybe on my mind today instead.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you is, like, do you think that your personal mental health experiences have had an impact on your work? Like, are there days when you like don't have the energy to get out of bed, but you kind of have to for your clients? Or like, have your experiences helped you relate to your clients and understand what their thought processes are and their emotions are?
Yeah, it definitely helped me relate to clients for sure, especially again when they're describing like panic attacks or trying to decide if they should take time off of school or work or things like that. I'm totally like, oh my gosh, been there. I would say my triggers these days definitely aren't as severe. Like I haven't had a day where I couldn't get out of bed in like years. But I'll have my days where I do wake up and I am kind of like, oh, okay, like my chest feels a bit more heavy. I usually won't tell clients that specifically, but I'll be kind of transparent and just be like, I'm not feeling the best today. I'm sorry if I seem, a little less bubbly than usual, or something to that effect. That way they just know, like, it's not them, I'm not bored or annoyed or whatever. And usually on those days, it's like, so in between clients, I'll try to write my notes, but on those days, it's like, I'm not going to do my notes today, I'll do them tomorrow, and just, like, really allow myself to have those breaks in between clients, whether it's a 10-minute walk or just having my tea or whatever. I think the relatability piece is huge. And even going through therapy myself, I can also reflect on, like, things that my therapist has either said that I loved or kind of influenced my thinking. And so I think even knowing what it's like to be in the client seat too.
Yeah, I like that idea of, like, mini breaks. One of my previous guests actually brought up self-care at work. And making sure that you kind of take those little breaks to, like, recenter yourself and, like,
totally
separate your work or separate your clients and everything like that. I think self-care at work is huge too.
Yeah, when we're at work, like, 40 hours a week, 35 hours a week? I mean, we're there for a good chunk of our time.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's funny because I have, like, a little couch in my office. And so sometimes when my clients aren't there, like, in between sessions, I'm like, I'm just going to lay on the couch for a few minutes.
Yeah, that sounds
like,
amazing.
Get cozy, get comfy.
Yeah. I love that. I wish I had a couch at work, too.
It's quite a treat.
Yeah. You talked about earlier kind of clicking with your therapist. Have you ever had a situation in your own work where you kind of didn't really click with a client or you didn't think it was really working? Like, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, I've had a few. I mean, so I guess firstly I try to give it time just to see if it is, like, too soon to have that expectation.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I'll just bring it up with the client directly. So I'll just be like, hey, I feel like perhaps we're not quite getting along, or there's something missing. What's your thoughts on it? And either, like, I've had some who are like, oh, really? I thought it was great. I'm like, okay, cool, perfect. Whatever works for you. And then I have others who are kind of like, yeah, I sort of felt the same. And I just try to refer them either to someone who's a better fit or figure out what they need, I guess. I think, like, a lot of it, like, a lot of success in therapy really is that rapport. Like, if they trust you, if they're comfortable with you, they're going to want to tell you more stuff. They'll probably do their homework. They'll probably be in touch with you. So I've really learned not to take it personally. Like, okay, it's not me. They just maybe need someone who's more assertive, or maybe they need someone who's older, or, some of the younger, like, I have some 12-year-old boys or whatever, maybe they need more of, like, a male therapist and kind of like a, buddy-buddy kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I have learned not to take it personally.
Yeah. A big part of therapy is being comfortable with the person you're talking to and being able to just be honest and open about everything about yourself without, like, fear of judgment from that person.
Totally.
So that's a huge aspect of it, is just being able to click and connect with them.
Totally. And it's like, that piece of fear of judgment. Like, again, I think if there's any fear at all, you're not going to share everything, and it's not going to be as helpful to you because there's kind of a part of the puzzle missing.
Yeah, exactly. So for people that are interested in starting therapy with you, what does that process look like from, like, at the beginning, I guess?
Yeah. So usually I do a free, like, complimentary, like, 30-minute session, honestly, just so they can meet me before paying. So it's kind of just like almost like a meet and greet. So just, here's a bit about me, tell me a bit about you, what questions do you have for therapy, what concerns do you have? After that, our first session's pretty standard. It's kind of that intake session, so it really is just a lot of questions, getting the background history, figuring out the therapy goals, figuring out how frequently someone wants to come or maybe needs to be coming. And then after the first session, I kind of take a pretty open-ended approach. So I really like my clients to sort of lead whatever it is that they're going through. So I kind of want them to bring up what they need. But I'll usually do half my session of just checking in. So how was your week? What was good? What was bad? How did you cope in these times? All of that. And then I kind of do my second half of therapy with something more practical. So, here's a skill, here's how we can challenge these thoughts. Maybe we do a worksheet together. And then, depending on the client, I to leave them with a take-home kind of homework skill. Some people hate homework, and that's fine. So with those clients, it's like, hey, whatever, we'll just do everything in session, no biggie at all. But yeah, I kind of try to give people something to do in between session. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but sessions are only an hour in length, right? So most of the change, again, is not happening in the office. It's happening on your own time outside of here.
Oh, that's a really good point. The client also has to be committed to the change and working on themselves, right? Yeah.
Totally. And I think this is one advantage of private practice, is because it isn't obviously government funded. It is a bit more of an investment. And so I think for some people, if you're spending the money, it is kind of like, okay, I have to make sure I do what I'm supposed to do to make it worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm curious how COVID has affected your work and your own mental health.
Yeah. So for my work, I mean, there's definitely been those transitions of just doing video conferencing for sessions, or like phone call sessions for sure. Or even like now that we're back in person, I mean, I don't know if you can't really see my office too much. Everything's like super spread out, more spread out than normally. So everything's like 6 feet apart, and kind of all the protocols around like masking, sanitizing, that kind of thing. In terms of clients, yes, I have seen it affect a lot of my clients, either kind of severely where it's become like the main stressor, or just kind of that background like elephant in the room of it's just one more thing to worry about. And then yeah, for myself, when COVID was really first happening, I don't know if I maybe knew the severity. Like I was kind of like, okay, we'll be closed down for a month, whatever, that's cool. So back in March, I wasn't too concerned, and then it was kind of as we started to progress, and I was like, wow, like this is actually happening. I did start to have some moments of worry around mostly getting sick. So like if I got COVID, what would happen? Or if I have COVID and accidentally give it to someone else, what might happen? And now, yeah, I'd say this past maybe 6 months, I've kind of been okay with it again, in the sense that I think I'm just, okay, we've been around it long enough that now I'm a little bit more confident. I've had a few COVID tests. I know what to expect. So nothing super severe. Like it never stopped me from doing my job or stopped me from, going to get groceries or things like that. But just, again, kind of always in the back of my mind. And I maybe you can relate, but if you have any kind of tickle in your throat or ache and pain, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, it's COVID. Did I go get tested, or do I wait a day or two? So there was kind of a lot of that.
Yeah, I think that's really common for a lot of people. I remember when COVID first was talked about, my work schedule got shifted to different days so that we could have different crews in case there was an exposure on one. And we were like, oh yeah, we'll be on this schedule for like a month, maybe 2. And then, I mean, we're still on that schedule now, so.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I know. I totally didn't think anything of it. And I think too, I'll add, even just the way people could do their self-care. So, for me, the gym and exercise is huge. And, yes, you can exercise from home or go for runs. But I think for me personally, as much as the exercise was kind of the environment, it was the loud music, and I don't know, that was almost what motivated me to work out really hard. So even things like that have been missing. Or people, who are just really extroverted and just want to go and sit out with their friends. It's you kind of have to pick and choose who to do it with and where to do it. So even just the impact of our day-to-day care routines.
Yeah, the gym was a huge one for me too. I'm really into kickboxing, and so that was shut down for the majority of the year. You can't hit pads or anything. You can't be that close to a trainer. That is really hard for me. But like you said, a lot of the appeal of the gym is the music, and for me the social aspect and just getting to see people and interact with people that are there for kind of the same reason.
Well, I imagine kickboxing, you basically need someone there.
Yeah, exactly.
Either to fight against or the trainers who are working right with you. It'd definitely be harder to do at home, I imagine.
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot.
No, that's so cool that you do kickboxing. I love that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited that the gym is finally open again. And then, of course, I hurt my back like last week, just in time so that I can't go, but I can't wait to get back in there.
Oh, soon. I know, so soon.
Yeah. Okay, I want to shift again to your, I guess it's a personal website and Instagram page called Silver Lining Therapy. Is that kind of your, would you call that your own brand? Or how do you?
Yeah, I guess that's my brand. I think that's a really good word. Basically, when I graduated, like, from my master's, I had, like, no idea what I was going to do. Like, I was like, am I working for an agency? Am I going to work for myself? So yeah, I just kind of made an Instagram page. I really like that whole quote of like, you know, look for the silver linings and basically all the versions of it. So yeah, it's my brand. It's not like a company or whatever as of yet anyway. Maybe one day. But yeah.
I love that. I love following your page as well. You post so much amazing content and resources and just tips and
I love to hear that because, well, you can probably relate. Social media is way more work than I think I would have realized.
Yes.
I was like, oh, well, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you for saying that. It makes it worth it.
Yeah, when people tell me the same thing, I'm like, oh, thank you. I don't know if anybody is even seeing this stuff. Like, I'm glad it's resonating with somebody.
Totally.
Yeah. Like, I'm passionate about, like, what I put out there, and I'm sure you are too. But when you get that, like, kind of validation from other people, you're like, okay, yeah, this is worth it. Or I guess for people out there that don't follow your page or haven't seen it, how would you describe it, or what kind of content and stuff can people expect from it?
Yeah, I would say it's really general mental health advice or suggestions. The reason I say general is because it, again, like, even if we talk about just, like, anxiety, it can look so different from person to person. Like, there's just no way you can make it specific to each person or each experience. So general and just, like, very basic skills that really anyone could use. You don't need a diagnosis. Just if you kind of want to work on your mental health, mental wellness, all of that. And then, yeah, kind of, you actually touched on this, but I do try to give a lot of resources. So distress lines, depending, like June is Pride Month, so I've posted a little bit more about Pride, for example. Kind of whatever's happening that month sometimes is what I try to go with. It's hard to theme a page, but yeah, pretty general advice. I try to engage, so I'll have a lot of questions, you know, what do you think of this? Yes or no, or slide the emoji to whatever spot you believe the statement or whatever. So kind of some engagement as well.
Yeah, I love your page, and I would recommend that for anybody that wants to follow just general mental health accounts.
Yeah, and I'm always open to suggestions. So if there's like something you think you might want to see that you haven't seen, or questions, or I'm like we were saying, it's really hard to plan content. So if you guys have suggestions, I'd love to hear, because it's at least what you want to see.
It's so hard to come up with content.
Well, sometimes I think I'm just posting what I think is cool, but not everyone obviously thinks the same as me too. So.
Well, it's hard because not everyone has the same kind of reactions as you do. So something that you think is maybe not the best, somebody else will think is like what they need. So it's hard for me to post stuff that I don't love. You know what I mean?
It's so true though. Some of my posts that I were kind of like meh about are just like some of the ones that have the most like comments, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, kind of like you. Like, I was on the fence on even posting this, and like so many people actually like responded. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Instagram account to follow, or another mental health account to follow? I guess.
Yeah, I'd have to. There's one. It's more of a humorous one. It's called Psychotherapy Memes. It's basically what it sounds like, but it's just like a bunch of memes and kind of GIFs around like therapy-related things. But I like it because it's actually not done in a way that's harmful. Like, it is kind of, like, you might have seen some of them, but it'll be like, okay, what do you say to your therapist when this happens or whatever? And then they're like, go shopping or something. So it's just kind of humorous, and I personally think humor is really good, like especially in a conversation that's really difficult to have with mental health. If you can make light of it in an appropriate way, I do think it can really help with breaking the stigma. And just, again, like, we bond on laughter really and humor.
Yeah. Oh,
so we put that one for just some like gentle laughter and humor.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that one. That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if you follow it, but if not, you'll have to check it out. And it's actually run by a psychologist too. So yeah.
I think I've seen a couple of them. I don't know if I follow them. I'm gonna have to. I'll go check it out.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot that I'm like blanking on their names.
Right? It's so hard. It's so hard to like just pull them out of your head.
I can like see the post.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I like it's kind of those graphics. It'll be like a pie chart or something, and it's all colorful and like kind of looks hand drawn. Like I love like those kinds of visuals where it's like, you know, therapy isn't, or like this is what therapy is, or this is what anxiety is, or this is what ADHD is. Like I like those kinds of ones. But yeah, I'm totally blanking on the name right now.
Yeah, I like those ones that kind of show like what anxiety is compared to what like the general public think anxiety is.
Totally. Yeah.
I love those ones.
Totally.
Okay, now that you are kind of on your way through your healing journey, now that you're at this point in your career, looking back over everything, is there any advice that you would give your younger self, or is there any advice that you kind of wish that you had been given when you were younger?
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I just wish I told myself that, like, I didn't have to fight through everything as much as I did. Like, I think I was so, again, it's like the stigma, but I was like, okay, I can't be bothered by it. Like, I can't cry. Like I remember being at a funeral, it was my grandpa's funeral, and literally saying to myself, like, don't cry, don't cry. And that's so messed up. Like, you should cry at funerals. Like, it's normal. But yeah, I think just, like, allowing myself to cry and to just like feel what I needed to feel, and I didn't need to be like tough and strong, and yeah, because I think that's where it really caught up with me, was I held everything in for so long.
Yeah. Oh, that is so heartbreaking.
Yeah. It's kind of messed up.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's a really
But now it's like the opposite. Now I'm like, okay, tears are flowing, that's great, I love it. And like crying is, I mean, I don't think anyone likes to cry, obviously. Like, it's crying, it's not comfortable, but it's so cathartic. And sometimes after a good cry, like, you just feel so much better.
Yes.
You just feel like that weight lift off, and you're like, okay, like, I just got it out.
Yeah, oh, I definitely get that. Now I'm like, okay, I need a sad movie, I'm gonna just cry for a little bit, and then I'm gonna feel so much better.
Yeah, totally. And I actually, again, like, saw it on Instagram, but someone made a post and it was like, crying is self-care. And I'm like, that kind of hit me in the feels, because I was like, that is so true. Like, again, I think if you Google self-care, it's all just the really stereotypical stuff, right? Of like meditate or deep breathing, which is all great, but there's so many things that can be self-care that you would never find in like a Google search.
Yeah, and it's different for everyone. Like, there's so many things out there that you can try.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, like your cooking, for example, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's my happy place.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, one last question for you that I kind of ask everyone. Is there a stigma or a misconception surrounding mental health that bothers you the most, or that you hear most often that isn't true?
Yeah, there's kind of two that bother me the most. One is around schizophrenia. So basically, like, so there was that whole Montreal Greyhound beheading. Yeah. And I think that has really been like, all people with schizophrenia are like dangerous and murderers and blah, blah, blah. No, they're not all like that. That's still a vast minority. I think that one bothers me because it really does just put a fear into like society, and into, even when we hear about like the prison system or whatever, it's kind of like, they're schizophrenic, and it's like, no. So yeah, that one bothers me a lot, and I think, like, in my opinion, anxiety and depression has started to become really talked about, which is great, but I think we do need to shift gears a little bit to now some of these other disorders, such as schizophrenia or, you know, borderline or things like that, where maybe we don't give quite as much attention to. And then the other one that bothers me are the jokes of like, I'm just gonna go jump off a bridge now, or okay, I'll just go kill myself now.
Yeah.
And again, I just think it's off base and sensitive and kind of makes suicide seem like it's this really like quick, simple decision, and really it's not. And again, I think like that kind of humor is really harmful because people absolutely die by suicide daily.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another one that whenever I hear it, I always try to call people out on it as in a gentle way, but I was going to be like, hey, I think there's a different way you can make that joke.
Yeah, that's such a good one. I love all of those. The labels that come with, I guess, mental health issues like depression or anxiety or BPD or anything like that. Everyone's experience is completely different. And so categorizing people under those labels in a certain way, like that, that bothers me so much.
Totally. And I'm actually, that's a good point. Even diagnosis itself, I understand, like, sometimes people need a diagnosis for, medication or to get into certain programs or to get access to certain support. But I kind of go back and forth on even this idea of a diagnosis because that's exactly what it is, in my opinion. It's a label. And then sometimes you hear it and you start to say, like, okay, it's my depression, it's my depression, it's my depression. And then it's like that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where some of it could be your depression, but also people can have like a bad day, regardless if you have depression or not. So I actually try to steer clear from labels if I can, unless they're sort of needed for like insurance purposes or whatever, a program.
Yeah, it's almost
or I guess if a client really wants one. I mean, some people do find them helpful to make sense of what's happening.
Yeah.
Like I said, others are kind of more like, oh my gosh, this is my forever.
Yeah, it's almost like people use it like as an excuse or a reason for something to be happening. Like, oh, that's just my depression. Like, I don't really have to worry about it or face it.
Yeah, totally. Like, I think, well, and I think it's almost like this comfort thing. Like, it's, if it's part of your identity, and for some people, right? And so it's easy to say, like, oh, it's just this, but sometimes it's not. Or depression can, again, like, that piece of it looks so different for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you brought up kind of expanding our discussions further than anxiety and depression. Like, I'm so happy with the fact that we are even having these conversations and people are talking about mental health more often, but there are so many other issues out there that people just don't talk about at all. And,
totally. Yeah. I mean, we're making progress, but there's definitely more to do, but also any change is going to be hard, and especially on like a huge scale of like an entire city or nation, like definitely not happening overnight. So I know like Bell Let's Talk Day is kind of one of those ones where I feel like gets a little bit of attention, where people are kind of like, oh, it's only one day out of the year, but I kind of take the opposite approach. I'm like, at least they do have one day out of a year, and regardless of intention, like I don't know if there's money behind it or whatever, like it is still starting conversations at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Kind of the approach I take with some of those initiatives anyways, of like, I'm still doing something.
Yeah, it's kind of kickstarting those conversations. We just have to keep them going for the rest of the year.
Totally, get that momentum. Yeah, totally. And like this podcast is a great example of that, right? Like doing this year round.
Yeah, I actually launched on Bell Let's Talk Day this year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
What a fitting day.
Yeah, I really wanted to start it there and then just, keep going all year.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. Cool.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is all the questions that I kind of had for you. That was really quick. I feel like we just blew through so much.
Yeah. I feel like I ramble a lot, but I'm looking at the time and I was like, okay, I guess I was kind of succinct.
Yeah, that was great. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on that we didn't talk about?
I think the only thing, I kind of thought of this after, but when you were asking kind of what to expect at therapy, I think the other thing I would add to that is if you are starting therapy the first time, like even just having your own notebook of topics you want to chat about or questions you have, that way, again, like you can kind of go through your agenda as well.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because I think even in my own personal experience, like sometimes I'll go to a session and I'll be like, oh, I totally forgot to mention this one thing that's been bugging me. Just as you start talking, and you kind of like get caught up and distracted. So yeah, that would just kind of be the other piece I would add to that is kind of put it in your phone or a journal or whatever, and like you can read them in session. Like it's not like school. Like you're allowed to look at your phone if you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just add that little piece.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good idea. I have the worst memory, so I need to write down everything.
Yeah.
So I love that idea.
Totally, I know. Well, and it's kind of, again, like, I think it's like how one conversation just flows into a completely different pathway.
Yeah.
But then there's still like these other ones where you're like, wait, I forgot to put them in. So
Yeah, exactly.
That would maybe be my final take home is like if you're interested in therapy, just tracking things in a notebook or on your phone or whatever works for you, just so you like have it.
Okay, well, if people want to reach out to you or have more questions for you, where can they find you, or what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, if you're on Instagram, Silver Lining Therapy is probably the easiest, just because if you click the link, it'll take you to like my email and my booking and all that anyways. If you're not on Instagram, I would just say Serenitynowwellness.ca, so that's just the website of the practice I'm at, and then again, all my information will be on there. So yeah, you can email me, you can book in with me if you want to book in. You just have like some random questions, again, you can email me and I can try to answer them. But yeah, Instagram's probably the main like area of getting all my information. I've got that link tree thing that everything kind of ties to it. So
Perfect. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to hear about your story and that you're doing so much better and that you're doing amazing work as well. Like we've talked about so much, and this was so great. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And again, like, yeah, thanks for all your vulnerability and what you're doing to break the stigma and just start these conversations. And yeah, it's awesome you're in Calgary. So hopefully after COVID, we can unite in person.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Feel free to reach out at any time. You can contact me on Instagram and Facebook at Stomp the Stigma YYC, and you can email me at stompthestigmayyc@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. And if you or someone you know would like to come on, I would love to have you. Share your story, speak your truth, and together we can stomp the stigma.